Order, order. Bob Blackman to move the motion.
Thank you, Sir David, and I beg to move that this House has considered the future of libraries in Harrow. And it's indeed a great pleasure to serve under your chairmanship for, I believe, the first time in this establishment. I want to set out the case for the continuation of public libraries in Harrow, the London Borough of Harrow, part of which I'm privileged to represent. I have had, over the last 25 to 30 years, great involvement in libraries, both in Brent and in Harrow. And indeed, when I was first elected as a councillor in the London Borough of Brent, the then Labour administration in Brent tried to close libraries in Brent after a long campaign by the community. That was overturned. And when I became leader of Brent Council in 1991, we invested in public libraries and turned them around to be facets where things were used to the ultimate. In fact, I was almost considered a revolutionary because I opened the Willesden Green Library on Sundays so that students could go in there and study. Sadly, in Brent, the Labour administration in 2010 decided to close 4 libraries and create a new civic centre library. The result of that has been a long community campaign which has led eventually to a community library in the ward I used to represent reopening as a community-run library. So it does demonstrate that actually the public want libraries to continue. Now, in contrast, in the London Borough of Harrow, over the whole period, only one library has actually closed, namely the Gayton Road Library. And I will come back to that later in my contribution, because this is rather an important issue in terms of what is going on at the moment. Now, during the last 5 years, we've had a position whereby the library service has been put out to tender and various different aspects have changed with a diminution of the services provided to library users. Now, the current position is that the Labour administration in Harrow claimed when we started the budget process last year, they needed to find 75 million in budget savings over a 4-year period. That would have been okay, but the day after, they'd actually recruited the chief executive and reinstated that at a salary of £160,000 per annum. And in fact, they even went further. They rehired the chief executive whose post had been deleted some 6 to 9 months before. That would have made a saving of £1 million over 4 years. Quite enough to fund all of the borough's libraries. Now, the council has now changed its view. It says it has to find savings of 83 million. So we're not quite sure whether it's 75 million or 83 million. As part of that savings drive, the council proposed a swathe of public facilities to be closed, including Harrow's only arts centre and the museum. Of course, there was a huge backlash, and I joined with my honourable friend, the member for Wrexham North and Pinner, to actually prevent this from happening. And I'm pleased to say that the council has backed down on closing the Harrow Arts Centre, at least on a temporary basis, and alternative funding arrangements are being made at the moment. However, and this is the urgency of the case, Sir David, from 5 o'clock on the 13th of June, 4 of Harrow's 10 public libraries, namely the Bob Lawrence, Hatch End, North Harrow and Rayners Lane libraries, will be closing their doors, despite the protests that there have been at a local level. Now, there has been a consultation on this particular set of proposals. The Harrow Council undertook a consultation between the 24th of November 2014 to the 19th of January, and they found that 71.48% were against the closure of the libraries. Now, of course, that doesn't stop Harrow's Labour-run council from wanting to close them. And in fact, the consultation was flawed because it specifically had the suggestion that library users in Edgware could use the alternative Kingsbury Library, which is in Brent, or alternatively the Burnt Oak Broadway Library, which is in Barnet. So I'm not quite sure whether the council taxpayers of Barnet or Brent would welcome the council taxpayers of Harrow using their libraries free of charge, but The other issue, of course, is that Barnet Council are currently consulting on closing the Burnt Oak Library. So that means that the consultation was completely flawed in its own right. There is also a strong feeling locally that actually the decision had been made even before the consultation started. And this is really just a process of rubber stamping the decision made by the council. All aspects of this are being ignored. There was an excellent campaign in Edgware to preserve the Bob Lawrence Library in particular. Campaigners raised a petition of more than 5,000 signatures wanting to keep the library open. And indeed, my honourable friend and the former Secretary of State both visited the Bob Lawrence Library to see for themselves the good work that is done and the use that is made of the library. It is not just a centre for giving out books and for people to read. It is a place where young people study, where students who don't have facilities at home need to go to a library in order to do their homework and their project work. Young people at school also need it to do their homework. And indeed, members of the public go for various different community action. Now, there was an excellent business case put together by the community to keep the Bob Lawrence Library open in particular. It was fully funded. There was a revenue stream which had been created, and they identified a number of revenue streams, including social enterprise funding. They proposed the option of taking over the library as an organisation under the community right to bid. Now, the sad problem is that it's the council that decide whether the community right to bid should be allowed to go forward. And surprise, surprise, the council rejected it and decided that they were going to reject the business case, but they haven't given any specific reasons for rejecting the business case, just saying it doesn't pass muster. Now, the fact is that those that run Harrow Council at the moment want to place the blame at the door of the government, but their claim is disingenuous. It's worth pointing out that the work put in by Harrow Council was run by an independent Labour and minority Conservative administration. The council had a balanced budget for the previous 2 years. It delivered savings of 22.8 million over the 2 years, so it is possible to achieve savings without closing public facilities. In March, the Prime Minister came to Harrow and this subject was raised with him quite directly. And he made the point at the meeting that we're at that Harrow Council had actually spent less than their budget envisaged, and the budget for 2014-15 was actually higher than it had been for the previous year. So the point is the council has reserves, it has the capability to fund the libraries if they so choose. There is no need for libraries to be closed on this scale. And then, of course, we have the next point that Harrow Council have come out with, their announcement of a new library for Harrow. This is proposed in Harrow Town Centre with state-of-the-art facilities, self-service technologies, and is being considered at the moment as a proposal. But if one inspects the proposal, it is the redevelopment of a site which has not happened yet. No planning permission has been given for it. It is an extremely controversial planning application because it will be an extremely tall building and there is a lot of local opposition to the whole planning application being considered in the first place, let alone setting up a library. Just to make it even clearer, the site which is being considered is the site of the old Gayton Road Library. So this is merely the library that was closed being replaced by a new state-of-the-art one. Now, according to Harrow Council, as of April 2014, the total library membership in Harrow was 146,661 people, which is just about 40% of the population. Now, I would suggest that this means that the people of Harrow greatly value their community libraries and don't want to see them removed. According to the demographic information, which was completed at the time of joining in August 2014, 46% of active borrowers were under the age of 18 years and 13% were over 60. Given that the Office for National Statistics states that 20% of people in Harrow are under the age of 16 and 14% of the population are age 65 plus, This represents a huge level of use from both age groups. These libraries are vital resources that need to be retained for school children, older people, and all the groups that want to use computers that do not have them at home. Furthermore, Harrow Council's own data in 2013-14, there were 1,104,846 visits to Harrow libraries and 1,147,630 items loaned from the libraries. Harrow is always ranked in the top quartile of outer London boroughs for book loans and is ranked 4th out of 18 boroughs in that time period. So local residents want to use the libraries, as I've stated, for study purposes, recreation, computer access, social activities, and very importantly, access to council information. It's vital that those facilities are provided and continue to provide. And one of the concerns that I have is that if the Bob Lawrence Library were to close, the nearest library to that library is some 2 miles away, which would be the Kenton Library. A long journey on foot for many of the elderly people, and indeed, of course, a challenge for younger people as well. And there is no direct bus service either, or train service between the two. Now, it's quite clear that the government cannot be blamed by Harrow Council for its decisions on cuts and spending. For example, the government commissioned the Independent Library Report, led by William Steckarts, to advise on the future of libraries, and one of the report's central recommendations was to increase the number of libraries with internet and Wi-Fi. As a result, £7.4 million was allocated in the 2015 budget to deliver that. The Arts Council, supported by government funding, has also allocated £6 million to help libraries increase the range of facilities they provide to visitors. So, although some libraries have chosen to stage exhibitions of paintings by local artists to increase the number of visitors, this shows that entrepreneurial spirit can make a difference. Now, in conclusion, Sir David, the fact is, efficiencies can... I will indeed give way.
Extremely grateful to my Harrow neighbour for giving way, and he's making an interesting argument. And I similarly hope that North Harrow Library can be kept open. I thought he went a tad too far, if I may say so, in suggesting that the government can't be held to account at all, given that Harrow Council has been hit with potentially some £83 million worth of cuts over the 4-year period, inevitably meaning that the council is between a rock and a hard place in terms of the tough decisions they have to make.
Mr. Blackman.
Thank you. I thank my honourable neighbour for his intervention. I mean, clearly, as I said at the beginning of my speech, the council seems to want it both ways. It's either £75 million in reductions or £83 million. They can't seem to make up their minds. And if they can't make up their minds on £8 million savings, then I think there's a really serious problem at the heart of Harrow Council, which I of course, would take up the challenge if it would offer to reorganise their budget for them. But that's another matter. So the point is, Sir David, that efficiencies can be made within local authorities, as has been demonstrated, without closing community facilities. The Council received 2 proposals, as my honourable colleague also stated, about North Harrow Library and the Bob Lawrence Library as an opportunity for the community to take over those libraries. Notably, they're still considering, I believe, the proposal for North Harrow, but they've dismissed out of all regard the proposal for the Bob Lawrence Library. And I wonder whether there's a political reason for that, namely because the Bob Lawrence Library facilities, I think the community is being led by a former leader of the council who was also a notable Harrow Labour councillor. And indeed the Bob Lawrence Library community facility is being led by a former mayor of the borough who has fallen out with the Labour group on Harrow Council. The point is that libraries provide a vital service, offering people the opportunity to gain knowledge, skills, opening up new possibilities for work, education and culture. Harrow is a rapidly growing area, and we will see more pressure on school places, particularly at primary school level, and we need the additional public knowledge facilities for the children to access and for elderly people. Now, the Public Libraries and Museums Act 1964 requires that it should be the duty of every library authority to provide a comprehensive and efficient library service for all persons desiring to make use thereof. So the Act imposes a duty on the Secretary of State to superintend and promote the improvement of public library services provided by local authorities in England and Wales, and to secure the proper discharge by local authorities of the functions in relation to libraries conferred on them as library authorities under this Act. Now, given the large number of people using these services, the extreme dissatisfaction with the consultation phase and the apparent unwillingness to look into alternative strategies, I believe there's a case to review the decisions made by Harrow Council to ensure that the statutory requirements are being met, and I would be grateful for confirmation that the Secretary of State will pursue the matter. I have written to the Secretary of State today on the subject, inviting him to call this decision in and actually make sure that these libraries do not close next Saturday. And I look forward to the Minister's response to our reasoned argument.
The question is that this House has considered the future of libraries in Harrow. Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Sir David. It's a pleasure to appear under your chairmanship for the first time in this Parliament, and indeed this is the first debate that I've participated in this Parliament, apart from oral parliamentary questions last week. And may I thank my honourable friend, the member for Harrow East, for his excellent speech setting out the position in Harrow. And before I turn specifically to the position in Harrow, let me, with your indulgence, Sir David, talk a bit about libraries in general. No one should, in the 21st century, underestimate the importance of libraries. And indeed, I was speaking last week at the Society of Chief Librarians, where I made the point that actually, in a digital age, arguably libraries are more important than ever. The threat to libraries is perhaps one of nostalgia, that we still see libraries as places where a lot of commentators on libraries, perhaps in their youth, benefited greatly from libraries by going in and borrowing books. But libraries now offer a huge range of services that are equally important. They are, in essence, and without downplaying at all their importance in terms of borrowing books or in terms of reading and literature, they are very important community spaces and community hubs. And I'll come on to that in a moment, Sir David, because I think it's relevant to the position faced in Harrow. I give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Mr. Gareth Thomas.
I'm voting to the Minister for giving way. I can agree with him thus far in terms of what he's said. I wondered, given his comments about the future of libraries, whether there is any sort of library modernisation fund that his department has, which, for example, those who are trying to make North Harrow Library in my constituency, which the Honourable Member for Harrow East referred to, a community library, might be able to access to try and help them move things forward.
Well, I think that's a very useful point, and I'll come on to that in just a second, because I just want to make it plain, first of all, that every local authority in this country, every library authority in England, is required under the 1964 Act to provide what is known as a comprehensive and efficient library service, and it is open to the Minister to call in any plans to alter that library service if the Minister thinks that prima facie, as it were, there is a case that that is not that statutory duty is not being carried out. It's important to emphasise that that duty has only been exercised once in 2009 in respect of the Wirral libraries, and in one sense that was quite useful, Sir David, because the report that emerged from that, the Sue Charteris report, became a good guide for local authorities undertaking reviews. It has been the case that the government has not stood still as far as libraries are concerned. While libraries are provided by local authorities and indeed are funded by local authorities, and that has always been the case, Sir David, the government can and should play a role. One of the first decisions I took was to merge the functions of what was the Museum, Libraries and Archives Council with that of the Arts Council, which is actually a long overdue merger, because when the original 1964 Act was being debated, one of the points that was emphasised was libraries' role in local culture. So to have the Arts Council and libraries together was important. There is a fund, a lottery fund. It's not designed for the modernisation or transformation of libraries, if you like, per se, but it does exist to allow libraries to host and put on cultural events. It's a £6 million fund. Much of that money has been used, but there is still some money available. We also commissioned William Seacart to look at the important issue of e-lending, because in a digital age, more and more library users might want to borrow their books digitally, but it's important to get the balance right between the needs and indeed legitimate concerns of publishers who run commercial businesses and libraries. And out of that emerged the William Seacart report. It was a second report. We commissioned him to do a wider report on the future of libraries, and he made a number of recommendations. One of those was to set up a task and finish group, which we have done, chaired by the Local Government Association, with a chief executive, Cathy Settle, who is on secondment from the Government Digital Service, to look at real practical measures in which we can help libraries. It's called a task and finish group because it's time limited, it's focused, it's funded for the next 2 years to make a real impact. But William Seacart also called on all libraries to have Wi-Fi, and the Chancellor in the last budget before the election awarded £7.4 million to libraries to help them put in Wi-Fi. So in a sense that does answer to a certain extent the Honourable Gentleman's point, although I appreciate that the fund he is looking for would be perhaps wider.
He's been very generous in giving way. Were North Harrow Community Library, and I'm sure supported by Harrow Council, to put in a bid to the lottery for some of the £6 million funding pot that he alluded to, and were to write to the Minister with the details, would he be willing to consider writing in support of that request for finance to the lottery?
Well, it's important these decisions are taken independently, Sir David. The fund will be managed by the Arts Council, and the criteria for applying for the fund and whether or not one should be a local authority provided library or could be a community library will be established by the Arts Council in the coming weeks. The fund will go live next month in July, but it's also important to emphasise as well that there is guidance for community managed libraries issued by the Department of Communities and Local Government, and also I think it's incumbent upon me as a Minister to make sure that community libraries are aware of potential funds they might get from tangential sources, if you like, the kind of community funds that the Department of Community and Local Government oversees. Much of my time as Libraries Minister has been taken up with concerns about library closures, and I should emphasise that despite the mood music provided by some library campaigners, the scale of closures has not been on the level that people would have us believe. I think fewer than 100 static libraries, that is effectively library buildings, have actually closed. It is a sad reflection that 5 times as many libraries have been closed by Labour authorities than by Conservative authorities. But at the same time, there is good news. Lots of libraries have been refurbished, many have reopened, and indeed some Labour authorities, Liverpool, Manchester and Birmingham, Birmingham has built the largest library in Europe, albeit started under a Conservative council, and Liverpool and Manchester have refurbished their central libraries. When it comes to the specific position in Harrow, I do find that the situation as outlined by my honourable friend is somewhat depressing. It is, I think, I forgot to mention that I did in fact visit the Bob Lawrence Library with my honourable friend. I was privileged to spend some time with him in his constituency earlier in the year, and I have to say, Sir David, it was a pleasure to spend time with such a hard-working local constituency MP, and it didn't surprise me at all. It may have surprised some people to see his majority actually increase at the last election, and that was well deserved. But I was privileged to meet the people working in the Bob Lawrence Library and also some of the library users. And I think when one looks at what Harrow is proposing, a number of questions do arise. I said earlier that libraries are more than just about books, though they are important. They are community hubs. What has the Council done to look at the other services it provides that it could provide through libraries? What has it done, for example, about providing, for example, homework clubs for children, adult education opportunities, the opportunity perhaps for community nurses to talk to people about their concerns or give advice? Is it planning to apply to the Wi-Fi fund? Do all its libraries have Wi-Fi? Libraries that do have Wi-Fi attract many, many more users. Are libraries fully integrated into all the Council's services? Have they looked, for example, at how libraries can work with job centres for people who need to go in and use a computer either to apply for benefits online or to brush up their CV? Are they providing opportunities, as my honourable friend said, for young people to study. Has the council worked hard enough with the community to allow the community to take over a library? I was concerned, and we'll look in more detail at what my honourable friend said about the bids to the community right to bid to take over a library. Community libraries are an important aspect of library services, and I think it is incumbent on councils where the community is prepared to step forward, not to shut the door, Sir David, but to open the door and welcome the community in. Have they looked at different models for how they could run their library service? If you look at the Industrial and Providence Society in Suffolk, for example, which took over Suffolk's libraries, they've extended the opening hours and kept their libraries open. Have they looked at mergers with other library authorities? Westminster, Hammersmith and Fulham and Kensington and Chelsea merged their library services a few years ago, Sir David, and saved £1 million, kept all their libraries open, and in fact I think I'm right in saying that one of the authorities actually opened another library as well. So there are a whole range of features that I think now is incumbent on library authorities to look at. The Charterist Review, important though it was, did take place some 5 or 6 years ago. We have moved further forward in the last few years in terms of the way that libraries are seen, the huge opportunities now that libraries can play in a fast-moving society where more and more people rely on becoming more digitally literate and digitally engaged. And it is the case that I mentioned earlier that library closures have not been on such a great scale as some library campaigners would have us believe. But it is important to say that every single proposal by a library authority to change its library service is looked at by ministers, and we get independent advice on whether it's appropriate or not to call it in. Up to this point, I have not called in a proposal because a lot of library authorities have undertaken a careful review, but I think it is important to put on record to my honourable friend that I haven't taken, and I've always said this, I've never taken the position that I will never call in any proposal, and I've certainly always taken the position that I would look closely at any and every proposal to significantly change a library service that is being provided. And it is certainly the case that coming back after the election, engaging once more with the excellent organisation, the Society of Chief Librarians, talking to library services that are enthusiastic and ambitious for their library service, I perhaps come back to David with even more renewed vigour, spurred on, I have to say, by the excellent task and finish group that William Seacart prompted us to establish, as I say, led by the Chief Executive, Cathy Settle, to really start to bang the drum again about the importance of libraries and to encourage more and more local authorities to see libraries for what they are. Not a burden, not at the front of the queue to be cut, but an enormous asset for councils to engage with their community and to provide their citizens with a huge range of different opportunities. And I know that my honourable friend, as a hard-working MP, represents a constituency that is extraordinarily diverse, and there can be no more important place than a library in a diverse community with people coming in and out of that community all the time, wanting to perhaps put down roots. There can be no better thing for them to do than to walk through the doors of a library to find a warm welcome and a map to navigate their new life. So I will certainly be looking at Harrow's proposals and we will come to a decision as soon as possible.